6, what is public broadband?
Two things. It's public ownership and control of the assets, right? So maybe, the entity doesn't, the municipality doesn't run the network, maybe it doesn't build the network, but it owns the assets. That to me is what ties everything together and why co-ops should join AAPB, because it's their members that own the assets and they're members of the community. And the second thing is, and I think this ties into both what Ty and Krista said, is that the primary value is connecting everybody in a community, not just the wealthy people, but everybody in a community, as opposed to maximizing return on investment. Not that there's anything wrong with maximizing return on investment, but that is not what public broadband entities, networks do, in my mind.
There's sort of two underlying principles, right? Universality, getting to the universal coverage, and then accountability, because you are part of the public, the community.
Very good.
Public broadband is not for every community. I might argue it should be, but it's not necessarily. And I do urge communities that are thinking about building their own is talk to the incumbents first and see if they'll build you the network you want. They're there already. And a lot of times the incumbents say, not really interested. So the community should have a choice to say, okay, well, that's not acceptable. I'm going to, partner with somebody to build a community network. I'm going to do it myself, or I'm going to go through the local utility. And I think that's really what's most important. Whether you're in a rural area, whether you're in an urban area, wherever you are, the community should have, it's all about community, whether it's rural communities or urban communities, the community should have the freedom to choose. And there shouldn't be legislative or competitive or economic or political barriers to do that. It's a pretty simple proposition. And if it results in competition, that's awesome too. I'm going to say the word overbuilding. I hate it. To me, it's a substitute for competition. But the bottom line is, whether or not you have the service you want, you should be able to choose if you're a community leader.
Well, that's really how Loveland, so we're a medium-sized city in northern Colorado. That's really how we came to be. And we were struggling with connectivity in our community, with our school district not having enough bandwidth to connect for standardized testing. We also had the current incumbents that were really cherry-picking our neighborhoods and really leaving a lot of areas behind. And we went to the incumbents and we said, hey, can you help solve this for us? We went through multiple rounds of discussions and RFPs and RFIs, all these different attempts to get someone to come in and help and to fix the problems that we had in our community. At the end of the day, we either were receiving poor responses back, where there was they lift regulations and we'll build, or give us money and we'll build, but not really a lot of solid ways that they were going to actually fix the issues, and nobody was willing to do ubiquitous coverage. And so we decided we were going to do it for ourselves, and that's really what, we've been very successful. We're 5 years in, we have ubiquitous coverage, and we are connecting parts of the city and the neighboring communities that were left behind, and we're really that digital gap that they wouldn't have had connectivity through the pandemic if we hadn't have stepped up and did it for ourselves.
And I do want to emphasize that, because I think the pandemic kind of really shone a really sharp spotlight on what companies were willing to do, what cities and towns were willing to do. I mean, the federal government at the time, it's not going to surprise people, I wasn't necessarily favorably inclined to the FCC at that time. Basically, they just begged the incumbents, can you please not cut off current customers? But didn't really do anything about getting other people, the people that weren't connected to begin with, served. And it was really the cities, it was really the states that said, oh my God, what am I going to do? We have kids who don't have devices at home, they don't have connectivity at home, there are people who have to now remotely work. And to the state's credit, and I think this is why the BEAD money and the CFP money are going to the states as opposed to being handled by the federal government, is they really did a great job of making sure that people, not every state, but a lot of the states that I work with, did a great job of making sure that people were able to survive during the pandemic.
Very good. Thank you.
I think it's really important to bring municipals together. And when an individual municipality is trying to do it on, if you've got a big city, then you can probably do that, right? But if you've got these small towns, then you really do have strengths in numbers, and that's where you get your leverage with a private company. That's where you can really negotiate something. And when you've done that, then you have control over pricing through the future, you have control over quality, and you have a way to manage for the future and create investments that continue to happen. So I think that municipalities still have time to do that with this BEAD funds, to work with their state offices, to encourage partnerships, to own the underlying infrastructure, because the BEAD money is creating an unbreakable monopoly in rural America. There's no regulation, and there will never be any competition. And so we just have to recognize what that's going to mean for the future and consider whether or not the investment of the funds can be done in a way that leverages your incumbent, that leverages the investor-owned company, but also creates some power and accountability in the communities.
So we're pretty unique in northern Colorado in that we have actually several municipalities that have launched broadband services. So we're one of 4 that are providing services to their community. And we have actually come together, because we don't compete, as you mentioned with co-ops, with each other, our service areas are different, that we have come together to leverage efficiencies and pool resources in a way to get economies of scale. And so we share backhaul, we share tech support, we share a number of different things. We meet regularly and share ideas with each other. But what's happened now in northern Colorado is that we have these pockets where within the city you have really good connectivity because we have built out our community-owned networks. But you get to the other side of the street, right outside into the county, unincorporated county, and you have a literal digital drop-off. So we've been working with our county and with our co-op, who does not have any desire to build out fiber, but does have the connections and the poles and all those resources to really create this community effort to expand our networks out into the unincorporated areas. And we've been very successful in that regard. And we have a lot of our neighboring towns that are very small that are like, we want to be part of that too. And so bringing all of these disparate participants into this mix has been really successful and is starting to lift the whole area up in a way that if we weren't working together, we wouldn't be able to accomplish.
There still are ways, I think, to set the scoring in a way that shows that public broadband or open access. And NTIA has been very clear that they really preference open access networks. But Maine, for example, and I hate to do this because I became really good friends with Andrew Butcher just in one day yesterday. we hung around, and he's just a lovely, lovely person. I think he's doing a great job. And I have to say, I've met so many SBOs, state broadband officers, and what they're being asked to do in the timelines, they're doing an incredible job. Again, it's not true all across the board, but in the states that I've been speaking in, I've just been super, super impressed. But anyway, to get back to my point, Maine gave open access 1 point on the score. It's like, why even bother at that point? So, I'd like to see more state broadband offices try to get out as much from under the kind of NTIA strictures as they can. And again, I'm sympathetic. I understand NTIA has really kind of made it hard to do that, to try to give a little bit more of a leg up to public broadband. And frankly, the small minority and female-owned ISPs, I was very involved in the effort, as was Krista, to push back on NTIA's letter of credit requirement. We were successful, woo-woo. And I do think NTIA does listen, and I think the state broadband offices are listening as well. But it's tough. It's tough given all the timelines and the deadlines. I feel for everybody. Let's put it that way.
Do you have the concern that BEAD dollars won't go to support underserved areas?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. It's one of our biggest concerns, and we have a lot of areas that are considered served because we have wireless providers, WISPs, that are serving those areas, and we know that they can't serve what they say they do on the maps, but yet now they're excluded because it is a self-reported mapping map. And it's just, it's heartbreaking because we receive calls and they're like, why can't you build out? And like, we need funding, we need to come up with a plan. It's not like we can just extend these networks because it is community dollars. We have different processes that we have to go through in order to be able to fund those networks, and grant funds are important, and they are going to be left behind. I mean, it is a reality, and I'm not sure there's a good solution to that.
I don't think we're going to get there 100% with grant dollars, but I do think that in Vermont, I do think that we're going to get there. I think the biggest challenge, one of the biggest, we're in the Northeast Kingdom. It's very rural. There's a lot of hunting camps. I've got, a lot of off-grid addresses. I'm worried about the impact that those unserved off-grid addresses have on the underserved on-grid addresses. So we're trying to mitigate that by sort of fighting to take them off as eligible addresses. And I think the other piece is, Senator Welch has, Reconnect America, which is to refund the USDA Reconnect project. And some people are like, why do you need to have something in Reconnect? Well, for two reasons. I mean, there are going to be areas in the country that are not addressed. And we also have, we want to get to fiber. We want that fiber to get to the home. We want that fiber to get to the farm. Then we also need to be able to give that farmer the ability to get out into his field to do precision agriculture. So this is where the and comes into place. It's not an or between fiber and wireless. I do believe that that's a mix. And I think that, we have to go after everything that's out there. I mean, we've got $23.5 million from the USDA, 65 million from ARPA grants, and, going after a lot of money under the BEAD competition. So it's going to be different in every state, and I hope that we make it there. I think our state's doing a good job.
Very good. Thanks.